The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people were evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spend a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. There's still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family was being evacuated, my group would just jump in and help out. So it was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
We are the Hawaiian Volcano Education and Resilience Institute, HVERI for short. A lot of people know us from the 2018 eruption of Kilauea in the Lower East Rift Zone. Working under Hawaii Tracker on the Facebook group. Since then, we've been trying to carry on and take the lessons, the hard lessons that were learned during that eruption and try and prepare for the next major disaster that comes to our island.
Yeah, so we do that through two different programs. One is volcano education, and the other part is digital resilience, which we address through online groups on social media. So the way the two programs work together is that the social media networks end up being a distribution pathway for all the information. And having that network in place means we can provide more than just volcano education, but any other preparedness information as well.
What we were working for really came about in the Mauna Loa eruption in 2022. Within hours of that eruption starting, we had the mayor, Mitch Roth, we had USGS HVO Ken Hahn on the stream trying to help flush out a little bit of the ongoing because it's so new. It's completely different from our previous major eruption, which was 2018.
One of the things that Talmadge and I were talking about was how do we deal with social media? And it was something we needed to figure out and get right. Our job is to get information to the public and make sure that the public get it as well as possible and as correctly as possible. When Philip and Dan started coming to and live streaming the meetings, it was great because we were reaching more people than we normally would. So when the eruption actually happened, we had this relationship. The interviews we did during the eruption, the most fun ones were the ones with Philip and Dave because they were more relaxed and we knew we were getting to the local community and people were asking questions. So those were the best, I think. I just want to really give a shout out to those guys and how we worked as a team on this eruption. It really worked out well and we got to a lot of people we wouldn't have normally got.
Aloha, everyone. I am Dane DuPont. I'm joined today by Lou. Appreciate you being here, Lou. Everybody wondering, where is Phil? He is attending the AGU conference in Hilo. So you get us today, and we're going to try and do our best. We've got a little bit of a special mix here today. We're going to start out with your normal volcano update, but then we're going to go into some of the photos and videos that were put up on Hawaii Tracker over the course of the eruption, and then some of the stuff that USGS put out, including time lapses from the cameras and everything. Then followed that, we have the After Dark in the Park presentation about the Icelandic volcanoes and the Reykjavik eruptions and all the stuff that's been going on there that we're going to do at the latter half. So any questions we'll take up front, and then we'll get into the presentation. Appreciate Carrie and Dano joining us today, our ASL interpreters. And how you doing, Lou?
I'm doing good. Staying on our toes with this eruption.
Right. So yeah, we are. Let's just go ahead and get into it if you're ready. And let's get into the volcano summary. Huh?
Let's do it.
All right. All right. Hello, everyone. This is your Hawaiian Volcano summary for February 13th, 2025. This week, we saw episode 9 of the ongoing Kilauea eruption. The 9th episode was less than 24 hours. It began about 10 a.m. on the 11th and then ended at around 8:43 a.m. on the 12th, so less than 24 hours. This was a eruption that was shown by a lot of high fountaining, which we will see here as we come up. And then as the eruption ended, we went back to having about 50 to 60% of that lava lake surface being covered with fresh lava from this episode. I just want to show here since the eruption ended, this is the last 24 hours. And even though the eruption's over, you can still see the lava lake, that had been covered over 9 episodes, plus the 6 eruptions prior to that, or however many. Anyways, we then see this little action with looks like a breakout of one of these perched areas, but we'll come back to that a little later. Moving on, we saw the end of the eruption get highlighted by the reversal of the deflationary tilt into inflationary tilt. This was seen at the Uekahuna tilt meter, as well as the tilt meter at Sand Hill. And this is both these tilt meters are around the summit, so measuring that localized summit inflation. Further down the rift, though, at Pu'uo'o, we don't see any of these signals of this episodic activity that we see at the summit. Moving on to earthquakes, we have fairly normal earthquake activity with a magnitude 3.1 flexure earthquake seen in Hawaii earlier this morning, as well as the activity continuing in the Deep Pahala area, as well as along the south flank of Kilauea, but lower levels as well as a few sprinkled around Mauna Loa. Air quality has been an issue, especially over this last episode. We're taking a look at the purple air monitoring. And you can see on the east side of Hawaii, the air quality has been really good. But on the west side, it has been hampered by the southern winds and the lack of adequate airflow to move it out, as well as the emissions from the volcano, which are estimated to be at roughly 10,000 tons per day. And that number is based upon the previous air quality up there that has been measured, and we see how this SO2 plume has been moving. The reason why they're unable to get new measurements is because when the wind direction is from the south, it creates difficulties in where they have positioned their monitors. They rely on the most predominant wind patterns to take their measurements. So no new SO2 measurements. I just wanted to show with windy here some of that wind flow from the south and how it's been hampering and really making the voggy conditions that we've seen over the past couple days. Switching over to Mauna Loa, taking a look over at the summit, we can see this little bit of snow up there remaining, but there's really not a lot happening in Mauna Loa. It is listed as green/normal. conditions, which is what is considered background levels of activity on Mauna Loa. Looking at the GPS plot, we can see maybe a little bit of inflationary tilt or an increased rate of this GPS inflation rate. But if we look at the scale, we're looking at a 0.02 interval, which is rather small. So maybe a little bit there, but really not much. And just looking at the tilt next, nothing unusual. So Mauna Loa is still green. And that'll do it for our Hawaiian volcano summary for the week. All right. So on to some observations. I wanted to look at that little breakout again, because that was kind of a, the eruption's over. I didn't expect to see much when reviewing the time lapses from last night. And we see that there appears to be what I first thought to be a resurfacing event. But then looking at it more and how it seems like we have this flow of lava from a top section to a lower section. And we've talked about it before, how there's a bunch of variance between the different levels inside the
the elevation change inside the caldera is pretty unique. It's all different levels, no matter where you go in that caldera.
Exactly. So it appears to me that we have what appears to be a perch pond. Let's take another look at a different angle. So from over on the B2 cam, so flipping the other side of the caldera, and we see that what appears to be an area that was, hardened, and then something come out through it, or it's hard to tell, but it does look like something breaks there, and then it allows all this lava to come back to the surface, which was just under the shallow or the thin shell that's been crusted over so far.
Which is different, Dane, than episode 8, because it kind of flowed around and broke out more in the northeast side, right in the foreground of this camera.
Right.
It's a little different.
And Phil was highlighting that, but still same type of thing happening, how it's that elevation in there is always changing. And finally, we have one more angle, one to highlight through the thermal camera. And here you can really see the movement of it and see how it goes. It looks like it's going away from the camera there through what looks like a gap. And it looks like that gap might have already been there, but something was able to, search for it. So pretty cool. And that brings us to Volcano Watch for this week. I know we're cooking along, but we got a lot on deck today. Right. So Volcano Watch this week is looking at that flexure earthquake that we highlighted earlier. And it's got more to it than that, but I do appreciate this graphic that they have, because it shows how we end up using the earthquake map that USGS puts out. This is the different one than the earthquake map on the HVO website. This was the map I showed during the summary. So the nice thing about this is you can see a bunch of the details, but you can also get to the did you feel it reports. And if you did feel an earthquake, you can see right on the third option here, the felt it report, and you can report it to USGS. You can also figure out, a bunch of the scientific data that goes along with it, including the beach ball, but it also will tell you if it's been reviewed yet. And that's one of the key points, that after it gets reviewed, the amount that it's going to likely change and be adjusted goes down significantly. Before that review happens, everything is automated, and we've seen how things have been revised somewhat significantly after the automated review happens by, the qualified expert seismologists at USGS that do this stuff every day. So they're just highlighting that. They're also highlighting the way in which the alerts come in and are distributed, talking about Hawaii County Civil Defense, how automated alerts within 30 seconds will be generated by the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center, pushed over to Civil Defense, And then from there, civil defense has the discretion on issuing a text message. And this is not an optional text message that you can opt in, that you have to opt into. This is one that makes your phone buzz, right? That, I don't know what you call that one, Lou, that specific type of alert.
Yeah, I can't. That tone, that certain tone, right?
Mm-hmm. I always call it the Amber Alert tone. But that's probably terribly, inaccurate,
right?
But that tone, that when it goes off, they have the ability to make that happen. Whereas the USGS alert systems you sign up for them, and then you're sent the notifications. Just how this is the separation between that we've seen many times between USGS HVO in their advisory role and in their scientific explanation role versus civil defense in their issuing evacuations or issuing alerts for people to do something. So that little that difference there. And yeah, it's we do have this listed on the Hawaiian Volcano Education Resilience Institute website, hveri.org, if you would like to check it out, the full article. And from there, I think we can get into our special presentations for today, which we've been setting up.
Sounds good.
You want to talk about these a little bit, Lou, or shall I?
Well, you've got the top half. I'll give you the top half. You did that one, and I did the bottom, so you can lead us into it. This is episode 9 of this most recent part of the eruption. So let me drop it in here for us. There we go.
And then we will, and we will switch to observations. So, as many of you probably know, we run the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group, and that group has a bunch of amazing photographers, videographers, professionals, amateurs, and everybody in between. And they've been out there videoing the start to finish of this whole eruption.
Yeah, let me throw in something real quick, Dane, on that. We can't discredit all the phone video and pictures that come in, because that sometimes we catch some amazing shots, and I appreciate some of those.
Right. Yeah, especially when the more important the information, the less the photo quality needs to be in terms of it being usable. For a lot of these summit eruptions, we're dealing with things that aren't very hazardous and outside of the Vog and the Pele's hair, which have been an issue. But besides that, it's not, in neighborhoods. So photo quality has been pretty high overall.
Yeah.
So we appreciate everybody that's put that in there. And
you ready?
Yep. So let's go ahead and skip through it.
Let's go into it. All right. First is a video. Here we go.
So this was the very beginning of the eruption. It's one of the first videos posted by Leigh Moore, one of our moderators, and shows some of the height of that fountain, which we'll be discussing more as we get in through this, and just the volume of this eruption. It came really quick, right, and went away just as quick or two. And then one thing that's, we're going to get to that, but the starting shape of this event was interesting.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Take a look at the lava coming over the side of the cone. There was so much coming out at that point.
All right. Here we have Andrew Cooper with the photo showing the height of the fountain versus the height of the Caldera. It was starting to rival it and challenge the rim. I don't know if it got above it, but it was starting to get close.
It was close.
This one makes it look like it's above it, but I think it's
not.
A little bit of an optical illusion going on there with the perspective, but awesome shot.
The view from Kanakekoi overlook.
Right.
Play that again.
You can see everybody out there, crowded, but not too crowded.
And this one here has got the smaller cone on the south side starting.
It just shows how good the view is compared it to
Mhm.
back to the early days of the first eruptions in there, where you couldn't even see the vent or the top of the fountains, to now having such a clear view. So here we have a photo compilation from Yvonne, and posted to Y Tracker with some of the what it meant to her essentially that day. So some really good shots in there. Go ahead and pull one of those up now. Show the height of that fountain again and all those lava flows coming off of it. View from Volcano House. And that was a very popular spot, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean,
The
if you
most
get lucky and you
accessible.
have reservations or you're able to get a table at
Oh.
the restaurants up there that night, it's pretty special.
I mean,
But
the way
it's hit
this
or miss.
eruption's going, I mean, booking a room up there is better odds than winning the lottery on catching an
for
eruption
sure.
starting, right? Let's see if this loads.
I need to highlight the. I just pulled it up so I could see the names more. Oh, we have a little bit of an issue. Hold on. What's the name on this? Sorry.
You see
Cynthia?
both cones going. What do you got?
Yeah.
Cynthia's, yeah. It's a good shot. Both cones were going here at this time.
Right. And this is one of those examples of how some simple cell phone shots can be right place, right time. Get some amazing footage. Ichi Tanaka crossed from shooting across Hilo Bay from Coconut Island. And so you have the lights of
Mauna Loa
Hilo
over here.
Mauna Loa on the right, and then you can see the glow of Kilauea and the fog coming off of the eruption. Really cool shot, and we've seen a lot of those over the years of various eruptions and how they look from Hilo. This is a cool one. We've seen a bunch of these videos of the past episodes, but it's always cool to see one of these vortexes inside the caldera on the lava lake, ripping up the chunks of lava and exposing the more hot material below.
Cody Yamaguchi.
Yep. One of our longtime photographers has been taking shots probably before 2018, but that's where I met him, was in that 2018 eruption. So a really cool shot there from Cody. Yeah, so there's some really cool shots. I mean, but that's what a lot of people are doing. I arrived back following a 3 a.m. At 3 a.m. following a 12-hour photo shoot. And you got to take advantage of it while you got it, because if you go to bed, it might not be there in the morning.
And that's the way it's been. You know, it's not making it much over the 24 hours.
Right. So really cool shots there. Appreciate those submissions. This is one of the best from Justin. Like, and this has got to be shot from how far away? Like 2 miles?
At least a mile. It's at least 1.5 miles to 1.75 miles. At least.
From like any angle to this. So really cool shot. And, you know, amazing just to see that level of zoom in the. Yeah. You wouldn't even know he was that far away.
Nope.
And then what?
Marcella.
I'm sorry, the names are really small for me right now.
I get it. Marcella Solera.
Yeah, it says, what a night. She never disappoints. And you can see the glow in the background there with the full moon. And I've seen a lot of the full moon shots. I mean, we could probably do a whole compilation of moon over Kilauea while it's erupting, and the galaxies in the background and all the stars and the different ways people do these shots. So
this one was
really
perfect timing for the full moon.
Right.
Dylan Taylor.
Yeah. Spectacular show Pele is putting on tonight. And I really like some of these photos and how we
Mhm.
did these. So let's go ahead and blow some of those up.
It's incredible.
Yeah, and these are so hard to photograph that it's always interesting to me how, the styles that people end up going for to try and capture it. And it did, none of them really capture the feel, but all of them try and get there in their own different way. A little bit of a longer exposure on this is pretty cool, showing how the lava is flowing though out of there. So longtime contributor Heidi coming in with one of her shots. And I think this one was pretty late in the game because that fountain pretty diminished. This was probably closer to morning than it was the beginning of the eruption. So morning the next day, just before sunrise, 4 or 5 hours before shut off would be my guess.
Yeah. And that's our Hawaii tracker community.
Yeah, so I appreciate all the photographers, and we still have more photos coming in. A lot of the photographers went up there and shot hundreds of shots. Only posted a few selections, but now they're going through some of their better material, and we're still approving those posts on Hawaii Tracker Facebook group. So if you want to check them out, you want to submit some of your own that you had from up there, or maybe at the next episode you go up, that's the place to drop them. And it was awesome to hear. I was cruising back from Hilo the other day, and on the radio, hearing the disc jockey talk about the eruption and how there's all these great photos, and calling out Hawaii Tracker as being the place to go to, see these things. So that was cool recognition to all these contributors that are putting in the work and contributing all their, great photography for us.
Heck yeah.
With that, we will see what the USGS has to offer, huh?
Let's go. Now this is the prior to the start. This is what Dane led off with, which was pretty amazing when we saw this footage. The morning of February 11th, prior to the start of episode 9, the eruption from the Caldera rim, they captured this north vent where the occasional spattering over the day prior had constructed a small cone within the vent. USGS footage. What a great shot, huh?
Yeah, and it looks like show it again real quick. It looks like a hornado, but a really big one, really active one. We had one in the end of the 2018 eruption that it reminds me of, except that one was a baby compared to how fast this one built and how big it is. So pretty cool to see, especially since both of them happened at the tail, or at a point where it was less active, but trying to go in between the phases, that phase change, and then to see it come up right through that same spot, right, which was pretty cool.
So this is the start of the eruption. I started this up here. We already see we have the flow coming out the bottom, and the fountain is just starting. This is the very beginning of it, sped up 5 times. Before it reached its, what was our top fountain height? Were we at 500 feet?
I believe so. I mean, I saw 400 to 500 getting referenced, and I didn't try and do the perspective because that sounded accurate enough to me.
Mm-hmm.
Did some stuff probably get higher? Yeah, probably. But
the shot was right after the shot I just showed you, coming off the USGS cam.
Really good, camera position.
Yeah, right.
And just a ton of lava coming out of there. And it looks like it, destroyed that hornado to me, like pretty quickly in the beginning.
Maybe, right? But if you look right here, you see it really kind of centralized.
It is.
Yeah, so might have just blown it completely out.
Right.
Yeah.
because that thing formed before this eruption began. So, and that's a lot of lava there.
It's a lot. So there's a shot that could have been the peak of it, not quite going over the top, but pretty close. Pretty close. It's a time lapse of the KW cam from start to finish.
Look how much of that bottom it ends up covering.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes a rather significant deposit of that fresh lava over that spot that ends up breaking out over the past 24 hours.
And you notice we didn't get
the
big push over here to the east like we did in episode 8. Everything came this way. That side filled up during 8, elevated that part of the caldera, and everything made a different move. So here we go into B2 cam. And this is what I was talking about earlier during episode 8. We saw the lava coming out through over here, where this one here, episode 9, going to the west side of the caldera.
It's still a large area that it looks somewhat small, but it's gotta be. I want to see how far it is across now then with all of these new additions, because as we've talked about before, every time it starts resurfacing, it gets a little bit wider, and it's really hard for it to gain more height now.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just getting so much wider every little bit that it does. In terms of new elevation. So it hasn't added a whole lot of new elevation, even with all of the new material.
This is a shot I like right here. Watch this side of the smaller cone.
Just look how fast it dies off.
Just shuts off.
We did hear from Philip. They were up there with the USGS and for the AGU. And they did one stop and it was going. And they went to the next location, and it was off.
Just like that. And here's a shot from Sura. You can see the glow from space. I did see another one also where you could see the snow on Mauna Kea as well. That's pretty amazing. It's how much just was coming out of there. And this is the evening of February 11th. Approximately 8:15 p.m. The north vent fountains were reaching 160 to 200 feet, while the bifurcated south vent fountains were lower, reaching 80 to 100 feet. More USGS footage.
And you can hear that wind. And yes, that is wind. I've heard
that's wind.
A lot of people claiming over the course of these episodes, like, oh, listen to the volcano noises. Oh, that's the wind most of the time. So yeah, really cool footage, and it's great for them to be putting out, this type of material too. Maybe doesn't mean as much when everybody has, some pretty good access, but especially when we're out in the rift zones and it's inaccessible areas, all those mean a little bit more. Yeah, really cool stuff.
Mm-hmm. This is the south vent right here.
Split mountain, yeah.
This south vent was really launching lava at a 45-degree angle for a long time. Look at that. That's not quite 45, but
yeah. It keeps building up that cone every one of these episodes, as long as it's still in that area and it still wants to continue to use those vents. They get a little bit bigger each time. And a little bit more awkward too.
Mm-hmm.
Is this the main vent here, or this? No, that's the side vent.
South cone. South vent.
South vent. Just great lava viewing, and lava viewing everywhere from basically what the sulfur banks all the way to Kīlauea and anywhere that you can get a line of sight in between should be pretty
Volcano
good.
House, Waldron's.
Volcano House, Waldron's Ledge, Devastation Trail. I mean, you could probably find a spot near Kilauea Iki you could see it from.
Yeah, probably. And that's a shot from Waikahuna Overlook. You're not going to get this view because it's camera's up high looking down. So if you were on the ground, you'd still get a massive glow. We've gone up there. It's always spectacular just to see the entire area glowing.
And no more Jagger Museum.
No more.
And the plume up above the lower layer and all the fog at the base. Pretty cool.
That was on February 12th at 6:40 p.m. or 6:40 a.m.
So just before it shut off.
Yep, just before shut off, it was still pushing.
And it seems like to me, when they talk about the 10,000 tons per day, that's just like an average, right? Because we know at the very beginning when those high fountains are happening and it's really going off, the SO2 rate is higher.
Yeah.
And then before the shut off, when the fountains are down and the output's down, it's still high.
Yep.
But it's not as high.
Yep.
So I could see it at the height being somewhere up in the more like the previous eruptions where it was 50,000 tons per day at the height.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all about when they're able to measure it and really having the winds play nice with them and use the normal trades.
Well, that is the end of our run of photos and videos. And there's a question that came up, Dane, since we're going to move, kind of change up a little bit. I want to go ahead and answer this one. I don't know.
Yeah.
How is the VOG at and near the caldera? Any idea?
So let me.
I can give a personal on that one since I've been up there. It's thick at times, and other times it's not. So if you have any type of respiratory problems, pay attention. Ask a ranger. All the rangers up there are wearing meters when they're out there, so they'll have an idea when it's safe and not safe. The park is open, and so it's safe enough to be up there. Just be aware.
So let me see if I can drop something in here and be able to show that real quick. So just pulling up the park's air quality monitoring, and we can see some of the data across it, and it's really been showing pretty good, in the SO2 and particulate matter in the park for the past, even during the eruption. But we do know that I don't know how great that was, that saying that there was no impacts. We do know that the Pele's hair was in the park, and the USGS did put out a mention in their update about that being one of the hazards, the other being SO2. But it overall looks pretty good, especially now, right, without the eruption going. So I believe with that we can see if there's anything else or get into our mid-roll.
We can go into the mid-roll if you'd like.
Let's do it. Go for it.
All right. All right, we'd like to thank everybody. Go ahead, Dane, and you can start us off there. I'm going to switch screens real quick.
Yeah, I would go ahead and like to thank everybody for tuning in today. The like, subscription, the shares, all that stuff really does help. The algorithm, I know everybody mentions it, but it does. We'd like to thank everybody that did make donations and has made donations. We did have one come through from Dawn. $5 says make sure to contribute, like, and subscribe. Appreciate the support, continued support there, Dawn. And we also, I don't know if we have it lined up, like to thank the Kilauea Recovery and the Puna Strong. No lineup.
Nope.
All right, yeah. Kilauea Recovery and the Puna Strong through the County of Hawaii and the Hawaii Community Foundation and everything they've done to help support this program as well as our youth development and digital resilience programs. And yeah,
there we go.
There we go. just had to get there. So
Yeah.
yeah, appreciate them as well.
Yeah.
So, shout outs and
have
believe
another
now-
donation that came through.
oh, great presentation. Appreciate it. I will be staying at the military camp in the park in about a week.
Right
Well,
on.
just cross your fingers you got the timing right, because right
Yep.
now it's kind of a crapshoot. You're probably in at a good point, and
Yeah. The
depends
update said-
what part of the week. Because if it's early in the week, it's probably more likely than later in the week.
The
But
update said, 3 days.
in 3 to 6 days, the most likely is 3 to 6 days,
Right.
and that would put it over the weekend or
Mhm.
Tuesday. And the next
Ish.
week. So ish, big ish on that. So we appreciate the support there.
All right, we're ready to roll into our Iceland vid.
Yeah, so this was our After Dark in the Park presentation. This was, hold on, the ongoing volcanic crisis in Reykjavik
Mhm.
Peninsula, southwest Iceland. And it was put on by the Iceland Meteorological Office through, I don't know, that's where it's monitored by, but it was John Gro Pedersen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's a great presenter. It was a really good look at Iceland eruption, different than just looking at the lava flowing. It was coming from a scientist, geologist, through shows the other struggles that happened, very similar to 2018 here. So there's a lot of similarities into it between us and them. So it was really a great presentation.
All right, and I believe this will also be the point which our ASL team is going to be signing off. So we appreciate them. Thank you, Carrie and Dano, for joining us as always. You're appreciated, and we will catch you next time.
Have a good night.
Have a good one. I was joking that doing the Icelandic volcanoes as the ASL team, it's like hard mode.
Right.
Try and sign some of those names.
Difficulty level hard.
Yeah, right. All right, so you want to go ahead and cue it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Part of Iceland. And thank you so much for letting me speak tonight and talk a little bit about what we have been up to in Iceland. So some of you may know we have an ongoing volcanic crisis on what is called the Reykjanes Peninsula in the southwestern part of Iceland. And it's really the largest natural hazard that has affected Iceland in modern times, both in terms of displaced people, but also in socioeconomic terms. But I was thinking before diving deeper into this crisis, I wanted to give you a little bit of context about Iceland and our type of volcanoes that we have. So this is Iceland in the wintertime. This is what it would look like now, unless it's completely cloudy. It's between 3 to 4 times the size of Hawaii, and we have a population around 400,000. The capital is called Reykjavik, and the official language is Icelandic, and it was inhabited in 874. And am I doing this right? This is what it looks like in the summer. So it's not always snow covered or ice covered. Of course, Iceland is located up here in the orange box. And so we are also in the middle of the ocean, but while you are on the Pacific plate fed by a hotspot, then we are on top of a divergent plate boundary. But we do also have a hotspot. So here we can see a little bit of regional context. So we have Iceland here. Here we have the mid-oceanic ridge, which is the center of the divergent plate boundary. And it's kind of crisscrossing Iceland in this fashion and going up to the north. And here you see the plume track. I guess you are maybe somewhat familiar with plume tracks here in Hawaiian Islands. So the plume is centered here in this part of Iceland, and I have a different schematic showing this as well. So basically the mid-Atlantic ridge is coming up here, and here we then have a zone of volcanism in the western part. And then we have the what we call the eastern volcanic zone and northern volcanic zone. So the spreading is happening across this area here. And then we have the hotspot located approximately here under an ice cap. This is ice caps, the white things here. And then we have, still learning these buttons. Then we also have some seismic zones. So these are primarily seismic zones down here in the southern part of Iceland, and then up here in the Tjörnes zone. So this is kind of the tectonics, and we have plate spreading with approximately 1 centimeter per year in each direction here. So this part of Iceland is in the North American plate, and this part here is on the Eurasian plate. And this basically means that if you look a bit unlike Hawaii, if you look on a map, you basically can see here, this is the youngest part of Iceland. So here you see the ages. So this is 11,000 years old, and then it's just getting older and older as we go down here. And you will see that the red colors and the brown colors, so the youngest ages, are basically in this zone. And if you want to find the oldest rocks in Iceland, you go to the East Fjords or to the West Fjords. And the oldest rocks that we can find are around 15 to 16 million years old. So when we look at our GPSs, we see, of course, the plate movement. And here is an example of what all these GPS measurements across the country looks like over a time period from 1993 to 2004. And you can basically see that one part of the country is moving towards America, and this part here is then reference to the Eurasian plate. So this is what it looks like the divergent plate, Brian. You kind of can see the movement in this fashion. And this is what our earthquake activity looks like. So our earthquake activity is also primarily centered in these regions here where we have the spreading, and it's either related to tectonics or to volcanism. So we will have volcanoes that are flaring up like this. And so here we have kind of a map of our volcanoes. So in Iceland, we have approximately 33 volcanic systems, a few up here in an old abandoned rift zone. And then we have the Reykjanes Peninsula down here, which I'll talk a lot about, going up to the western volcanic zone. Here we have the eastern volcanic zone going up to the northern volcanic zones. And we have we divide our volcanoes into these systems, which often consist of rift zones and then central volcanoes with either summit crater and caldera. Not all volcanic systems have a central volcano with a crater. Some of our volcanoes are indeed just fissure swamps. And you can see that 20% of the active volcanic centers are under ice caps, which of course is impacting the volcanic activity quite a lot because it's changing the eruption environment. And in Iceland, of course, also we have had 5 large glaciations during the last 0.8 million years, where basically the entire country have been covered in a big ice cap. And so we have a lot of volcanic features that are created by volcanic eruptions on the ice. And that create different type of landscapes. It's like the lava is not just flowing, it's basically building up mounts, quite unlike what we see when it's subaerial eruptions. And 90% is basaltic, very similar to the type of material that you have erupted here in Hawaii. And then we have 10% or more that is what we call more evolved magmas. And we have various types of eruption environments. We can have eruptions in the ocean, under the ice, and then of course also subaerial. So we have a large range of hazards that we have to account for when we are monitoring. And just to give you a little bit of insight, here's a very famous eruption, so let's say, that lasted from 1964 to 67, which is up here. It was an eruption at the seabed that created an island, which is still there, slowly diminishing because of erosional forces, and was very nicely described as kind of submarine eruptions. So this is kind of a Surtsayan eruption is something that is referred to in volcanology terms. Then we have big volcanoes here close to the mantle plume. So here we have an eruption from Grimsvötn in 2011, making a nice eruption cloud with a lot of tephra. And sadly, this was happening in May when we had a lot of new lambs. So a lot of this tephra then was very damaging for the farmers in the area. And this was a year after HVERI occurred. So the farmers felt it was very, very tough time with all this tephra being blown around. But of course, when you have eruptions under ice, you also risk having big floods, because obviously you are melting a lot of the ice. And we have evidence of very large-scale floods that can be that can happen during such events. We have a volcano called Caldera that last erupted in 1918 and produced a flood during the eruption that was the size of the Amazon River. So this is a very substantial hazard that we are dealing with as well. And then we have these subaerial eruptions where we have nice fissure eruptions that you are very familiar with. We have the Kīlauea eruptions in 75, 84. And before that, actually 50 years before this recent event happened, we had the event of Halemaʻumaʻu in 1973, where 5,000 people were evacuated from the island of Halemaʻumaʻu, and where a fissure opened up within the town of Halemaʻumaʻu. And overnight, the entire island had to be evacuated. And luckily, it had been very bad weather, so all the fishermen were in harbor and could evacuate people. And then there's like just the final type of volcanic activity I will introduce you to is these very large-scale fissure eruptions that we can have. See, I have to change this slide. This is wrong. We are talking 1783, 84. But where we can have these very large-scale volcanic eruptions where we have 15 cubic kilometers. This is it's basically, I guess, something like 10 times what the size of the year 2018 eruption. So these are very large eruptions. So this is a little bit of what we can expect in Iceland. And so the Icelandic Met Office, where I'm now working since half a year, is a multi-hazard agency dealing with various forces of nature affecting the Icelandic society. So it's a meteorological office, but it's doing very type of hazard assessment. And we are also the state volcano observatory, so nominated by the Icelandic Transport Authority and the International Civil Aviation Organization. And this means that we are producing weekly reports about the volcanic activity to stakeholders. And here's just an example where you can go in to the Icelandic catalog of volcanoes, and you'll see a web page like this where you can see the color codes of each volcano. And right now we are waiting for our next eruption on Reykjanes, so it's yellow. And you can find a lot of information of all the volcanoes if that is of interest. We have 24/7 monitoring at the IMO, where we have natural hazards specialists that are monitoring the volcanoes, the seismic activity and floods. And are making hourly weather observations. We have meteorologists that are issuing the weather forecasts and warnings for the aviation industry, the marine traffic, and for the public. And then we have a group of specialists that monitor avalanches and landslides on top of course, our volcanologists also. And during the day, there's always 2 natural hazard specialists on duty and 2 meteorologists. And 1 of each during night. And then we have the research division, and we will then feed into this monitoring when it's needed. So in order to monitor all these volcanoes, we have a range of monitoring networks, and which is very fundamental for successful monitoring. Here you see our seismic network, around 100 seismic stations distributed, and you can see the pattern repeats itself here. We have most seismic stations, of course, in this zone where we have most volcanoes. So this is where we have most of our stations. This enabled us to of course, have very good, mapping of our earthquakes and location of our earthquakes. We have a lot of GPS stations. I think it's around 200 GPS stations. These allows us to see the movement of the ground everywhere in these areas. And here's an example. This is also a public website that can be visited, and you can go in and click on each of these stations, and you can kind of see a time series. So this is a time series for a year, where you can see a GPS down here on Reykjanes Peninsula experiencing inflation periods and deflation periods in connection to magma inflow, and then eruptions where we have magma outflow of the system. We have strain meters, we have gas sensors, and we are of course also monitoring our rivers because a lot of the floods that will be draining from the glaciers are important to monitor through devices that are measuring the water level. We are measuring the conductivity in the rivers also, because this is an indication of whether some of this water are fed by geothermal / volcanic activity under the glacier. And we have gas sensors, and then we have various weather stations and radar network. And this really is nearly work for superheroes to keep these networks running. It's very difficult conditions to keep these stations running. The Icelandic weather can be very harsh, and we have a very dark winter, so keeping all of these instruments running is not a trivial task and requires a lot of manpower. So that was kind of a bit of the background, and now I want to give you the tour of what has been happening on the Reykjanes Peninsula, which really is a crisis that is ongoing and still evolving. This is a picture here from the 14th of January, where we had our second eruption in this area here. And in the foreground, you see the town of Grindavik, where we used to have 3,800 people living. Down here, we have the Blue Lagoon, which is a big tourist attraction, and we have a power plant that we are trying to protect. And up here, you can see the capital. So. But the Reykjanes Peninsula is kind of the most populated area in Iceland. As I said, we're around 400,000, and probably 250,000 is living around this area, and 300,000 in this part of the country. So it's the most densely populated area. This is the international airport, and this is our most important road. It's connecting us to the world, basically. So we have a lot of critical infrastructure in this area that are vulnerable to lava flows. And when we look a bit closer to the peninsula, we have 6 volcanic systems that are crisscrossing the peninsula. If someone could find some water, then it would be good. So you can see that these systems, they are crossing their way through the peninsula here. And this is what we call an oblique plate boundary. So we have this 1 centimeter per year on each side, but the systems are not, its opening is slightly oblique compared to the, or the systems are lying slightly oblique compared to the opening, so we also have a lot of faults in this area. And really, we know that eruptions on these volcanic systems happen in episodes, and the episodes last for 200 to 400 years, and then they're quiet for 600 to 1,000 years. And before 2021, the last rifting event ended in the 13th century. And on this map here, you see all the lava flows that was issued during the last rifting episode. And you see that there are lava flows that are running into the suburbs of the capital area. And really, this is something that we are resolving from the geological history. When we are looking into the records, we can see that this is these episodes that are happening at certain times, and then we have these periods of quiescence. So that is what this figure here is telling. Since 2020, we have had 4 volcanic systems showing unrests, showing magma movements. 2 of them have had eruptions, the Fageråsfjall area and the Svartsengi area. And then we have had 2 additional volcanic systems here that have shown ground movements going up and down as if we are having magma movements into the roots of the volcano. So this is kind of a new reality, and the people in the area have not experienced volcanic eruptions for basically for their lifetime in this area here. So really since 2021, we have had 10 eruptions. And before this time, we used to say that we have eruption in Iceland every 3 to 5 years. So you can see that we are kind of experiencing a period of much more volcanic activity to attend to. Thank you.
Where would you like to?
No, this is perfect. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So the first eruption started in March 19th. In 2021, and was a half a year long eruption. Then we had another eruption in the same volcanic system, Fageråsfjall, and another one. And then here we had a change, and then another volcanic system started, and have had 7 volcanic eruptions since then. So this is what I'm going to talk a bit further about now. The Fageråsfjall eruption was really kind of a nice eruption. It was not too intense. It was happening in valleys. This is just pictures from these eruptions. And it happened at a time where COVID had kept people isolated from each other. And suddenly you had this very nice, calm eruption happening basically within an amphitheater. And you could go to the hills around here and sit and watch the volcano. And a lot of people did this. People brought their guitars and went out and was sitting around like having a bonfire and was really enjoying this quite a lot. And in the end, by the end of the eruption, we've had more than 350,000 visitors, which is a lot for Iceland. You know, it's basically the size of the population of Iceland that had visited this spot. And it's by far the most visited volcanic eruption we have had so far. Yeah, there was a lot of different variety to the eruption. We had a period where we had new vents opening up. You also know that from your eruptions that it can evolve, the new vents opening, and we had all kinds of interesting things happening through this time, and could monitor it and calculate the flux from the volcano. So this is basically how many cubic meters per second that was coming out, and these are kind of between 5 and 12 cubic meters per second. So this was all kind of nice. The main hazard of this was basically estimating when these valleys would fill up and overflow. So we were very fortunate with this eruption. And the next eruption, which was then a year later, was much shorter. It was 18 days, and it started actually on top of some of the older lavas from the year before, and erupted down here, and then flowed over the older lavas from the year before here, and spread like this. And again, in a very fortunate place, and a spectacle for tourists to visit. The third eruption at the Fageråsfjall volcanic system was located a bit outside, so a bit further north. You see the other lava flows down here, and it ran into this valley system. And again, the fusion rate was kind of increasing, so the volumetric flux from location was higher in the initial part of this eruption. And we were dealing with quite a bit of moss fires. You can see this picture here. The air quality was very poor. we don't have a lot of vegetation, but moss burns and can produce, we can have moss fires that can go on, and then this was one thing that was very dominant in this eruption here. So now we will be looking to what has happened since we changed to the other volcanic system. So actually it was kind of funny. Already by this time we felt like one eruption per year was a bit too much. We could not really handle it. and then another volcanic system which has a different rhythm took over, and then we really had to get up to speed to try to follow what was going on. So really everything's changed by the by the autumn of 2023, where we basically started to see that an inflation area that has been over here, so the ground was inflating here, moved to inflation area here. This is what we call Svartsengi, this area here. And all these points here are boreholes because we have the power plant right here. And this is also what the Blue Lagoon is, because the power plant is basically harnessing the heat from the volcanic system. And so what happened on the 25th to the 10th of November, it was that our GPSs was showing that we had quite rapid inflation in this area, and the seismicity was spread out like this. And then by the 10th of November, we had basically 15-kilometer long dike that was being emplaced in this area here. So within one of those defined fissure swarms on the eastern side of the Svartsengi power plant. This dike here produced a lot of fracturing. So here you see a lot of ground motion. I don't know how familiar, this is an interferogram where you basically, each of these rainbow colors are showing you how much movement is happening in this area. And here is a deconvolved image of this where you can kind of see the movement. So these areas here have moved more than 1 meter down. So it's a substantial movement, and the movement went straight under the town and out into the ocean, and this meant that the town of Grindavik was heavily impacted on this. A lot of fracturing, a lot of houses that was destroyed, and basically the entire town was evacuated and had to be rehoused elsewhere. And here's just a schematic I wanted to show you, which is a science paper that have come out where it's kind of trying to illustrate what was happening. So we have a magma reservoir here at the Svartsengi area where we saw all the boreholes. And from this magma domain, we have a dike that is propagating this northeast-southwest straight under the town of Grindavik here. And doing so with very high inflow rates. So this was a very rapid event. It was associated, as you saw, with a lot of earthquakes, and it was very uncomfortable for the inhabitants. And many of them actually self-evacuated before evacuation had been issued. So after this event, we have just seen repetition. Every time we have had an event where we have had a dike or an eruption, it starts rising again. And then we have an eruption, it starts rising again. And we have earthquake activity along this area where we have this big dike that was being emplaced in November 10th. And this has given us these 7 eruptions. The first eruption was the December eruption, which was a 3-day-long eruption. It was fairly luckily located. So here again, we have the power plant here. Down here is Grindavik. And our eruption was happening along approximately 4-kilometer long fissure, and it was not traveling that far. You can see it would produce these very nice sheet flows going to both directions. But and at this time, it had been decided that we want to try to protect the power plant because in Iceland we can really not afford to lose a power plant. We don't have enough electricity to take out a power plant. That's creating too much strain on the electrical network. So barriers was starting to be built at this time around the Svartsengi power plant. And then the next eruption, so they had just finished barriers here and started in January to build barriers around Grindavik because we knew that Grindavik could also be affected about this. And they have just managed to build the barrier. This is a barrier that is running down here. And here you have the eruptive fissure. So most of the eruptive fissure was north of the barrier and diverted the lava flow from Grindavik to the road and to some hot water pipes here. It cross-cut a little bit to the barrier, but after 4 hours into this eruption, another fissure opened up into the town, and 4 houses was buried in this. This was a very tiny eruption. We were very, very lucky in that sense that there was not more magma that came out. This is a bit more than 2.5 million. This is a small eruption. And here is images of the road being covered in magma. And by this time, we just had built this barrier here. So it should be said maybe that this month was particularly bad. Can I go back? No, here, yeah. Because actually what had happened 4 days before this eruption started was that because of all the fracturing in the town, they were trying to fill up the fractures. Some of these fractures was 20 meters deep, and there is water at the bottom of these fractures. So they're starting to fill up the fractures, and both to prepare the town for potentially people being at some point able to move back, and also because we have a natural hazard insurance fund that was evaluating the damage on all the houses, and the people who were evaluating the damage on all the houses had to get around to see the houses. And so for that reason, we would be filling up the cracks. And one of the guys who were working on filling up the cracks fell into a crack and disappeared, and was never found. And so this, just around this time, like the 10th to the 14th of January, I think a lot of people in Grindavik really felt that they were not coming back to this town. At least if you had kids that could run around and fall into cracks. So this was a very difficult moment for people. Then a little bit less than a month later, we had another eruption. And these eruptions, I should say, start with very high effusion rates. So they can run quite quickly. And here, in this case here, we have an eruption that is actually only 26 hours long, but manages to run around 4.5 kilometers. And this eruption cut the main road to Grindavik here. But it also damaged the hot water pipes. This is the hot water pipe being damaged by the lava. And here you see the Grindavik road being buried in lava. And 30,000 residents of Iceland, so this is 10% of the population, were without hot water for 3 days. That was the time that it took for them to reconstruct the piping, which was incredible. They had to make a road over the new lava and basically lay a new water pipe over the new lava, because there was our hot and cold water system is not redundant. We don't have other ways to supply those 30,000 people with hot and cold water. So that's, of course, is also something has made us think quite a lot. There are a lot of people spending time on thinking about having redundancy in the system, because it's clear that it's quite vulnerable. Then we had the March eruption. So this is the longest eruption we've had so far, 54 days. This one again cut the Grindavik road, but it did not destroy the hot water pipes. And we had some of the lava going down here on the side on this side of the barriers, yeah, here on this side. So it was diverted by the western part of the barriers. But really, compared to some of the other eruptions, it was not too many things was destroyed. We had to reinforce these barriers here. They started to, the lava flows started to inflate and go over, so they were reinforced. And this is kind of just to say that this is a constant battle. The barriers are being heightened, and every time it has diverted lava flows, then you have to heighten the barriers. Then we had the May 29, so less than a month after the last eruption had stopped, we had a new eruption. And this eruption again starts very intensively. You can see here like how the sheets of lava is just running very quickly. And it was running over the road here just north of Grindavik, and eventually it also ran over the road here and went over some of the barriers a little bit here. And each of these times we basically have an evacuation of those that are in Grindavik, which are very few at this point, and the people at the Blue Lagoon. It is an effort to try to keep business and running in the town. And since this is such a long-lasting crisis, authorities are really trying to enable that people can keep having their business, including, for instance, the Blue Lagoon. But it means that, of course, there are people in the area, and we have to have very good evacuation routes, and we need to provide information about the timings of when lava can be where and which roads will be cut, can potentially be cut when. In this eruption, we had free paved highways, inundated by lava, gravel road tracks that were covered, high voltage power lines affected, damage up to optical cables, and minor damages to communication mast owned by the US Navy here on this side here. So Iceland is favorably located in the North Atlantic, is an important location for a lot of communication in the North Atlantic. Yeah. And here you see an example. This is an example of the barriers here you see in the background. The barriers actually work like that they always have holes in the roads, and then you have extra materials. So every time there's an eruption starting, we have bulldozers in the area that hurry up and take the material and shovel it in front of the road. Because we of course need to get through to those areas, and the people working at the power plant need to get into the power plant. So these holes in the barriers are being closed all the time. You can see the lava coming, and then later in the eruption we had the lava was going up to the barrier here, and it was basically inflating, growing upwards, and then it was spilling over the barrier, but it was very minor. So the power plant was still safe. Nothing happened to the power plant. And here, in August, September, we had the 6th eruption. And this eruption was the biggest eruption so far. There's been a general trend that the eruption size and the intensity of eruptions are increasing over time, which is of course quite worrying. So we are kind of constantly having to project that the scenarios are gonna grow. But we were very fortunate with this large eruption. It was a 6-kilometer long fissure that was opening up, but it was opening up to the north. And to the north, the lava kind of get trapped in a lot of faults and sinks. So actually nothing really happened in this eruption. Like no damages happened to any roads or anything. But of course, it keep a reminder for us that if we get such an eruption to the south, we will be in big trouble. And then the last eruption we've had so far was in November, 18 days long eruption. And here we had the lava flow. The intensity was a bit lower than the previous eruption. So until this eruption, we had seen this kind of increasing trend in volume and intensity. This eruption was slightly kind of premature, if you can say it. So it's kind of something failed in the magma domain a bit earlier. So we did not get as high initial fusion rate, but it was more sustained, and we actually got the longest lava flows in this eruption here, like 4.5 kilometers from the fissure. And the lava again went over the road. It went over the hot and cold water pipe again, but by this time it has actually been insulated, and the insulation holds, so nobody lost their hot and cold water. But the Blue Lagoon lost their parking lot, which was here. So yeah, and a lot of lava came all the way here and inflated and was just about to run over when the vent that was feeding this flow shut down. So again, we were fairly lucky that these barriers was not overrun. All right, so we have this continuing volcanic crisis. By now, it's basically 14 months. And it has large escalating economic costs. We are building these lava flow barriers. We need to rehouse a lot of people. And the Icelandic state had made a deal with the Grindavik citizens. Of course, the people which houses was damaged was covered by the natural hazard insurance fund that we have. But there are, of course, a lot of people that have houses that was not damaged, but still could not live there because kind of the entire environment is damaged. And the Icelandic state decided to buy, if people wanted, the Icelandic state would buy the house, so they could actually have money to buy a new house somewhere else. So this is, of course, a gigantic cost to buy an entire village of houses because most people did not want to live there. Yeah, the crisis continues to evolve in geographic extent. The degree of disruption and long-term monitoring and risk assessment is needed. Yeah, and it's, as I said, the largest natural hazard that have affected Iceland in modern times, both with respect to the displaced people and the socioeconomic impacts. And the displacement has been really tough for the people of Grindavik. It has been difficult, of course. We have a housing crisis in Iceland, so going out and finding new homes is difficult, and you will not get the same size home as you had. And we have, of course, everybody have kind of lost their social life and their neighbors, and they have lost their sports facilities, and they're kind of spread on the Reykjanes Peninsula. A lot of people are living in the capital area, but also elsewhere. And there are a lot of attempts to try to help with the, what do you call it, the mental stress that these people have been going through. It's known that a lot of the kids are also having a difficult time because they have basically not necessarily any of their friends around anymore. So this is very difficult. They're trying to make various arrangements so people can meet and the kids can meet and so on. And this is just an example of the cracks in the houses that makes it very evident that a lot of these houses are just not livable anymore. So to summarize, in Iceland, for us, this is a volcanic crisis that has an unprecedented scale. As much as maybe it's like the main thing has been that the faulting have damaged so much of the village. The lava has not necessarily costed many houses at this point, as much as we are having a huge effort in order to try to still protect the power plant and all our infrastructure. It's prolonged. and it has a lot of economic impacts. And so today this is our kind of model of what is happening in the magma domain. We see that it's rising, and then we have eruption, then it's rising and have eruption. And here you see this is the last 7 eruptions we've had. And right now we are here. So we are waiting for the next eruption. We have, in the Caldera fires, this lasted for 9 years, this kind of rifting episode. I kind of hope the fact that it's kind of a higher frequency than we saw in Caldera, that this volcano get tired faster than 9 years. That would be very helpful for a lot of people. So with that, I just want to say thank you, and yeah, welcome questions.
What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of parallels there with what we end up doing, and it's always interesting, to hear from them. And one of the things that makes me think of is one is the diversion attempts, but the other is the sense of like the eruption's already happening. You're already, a significant amount of time into the thing, and your house is still in jeopardy, and you're living day to day, and not a whole lot's changing, but you're just waiting for it almost. And our period only lasted 3 months, and they're at almost a year and a half essentially. Right. So that's rough. And the diversionary thing, we always talk about why don't we do diversion here in Hawaii? And it always comes back to legality of it, the cost of it, and then the cultural impact and implications of it. And the main thing is that when the county were to go out and touch one of these things, or the state were to go out and touch one of the lava flows, they now own it and all of the resulting damages from that lava flow. So if they divert it, you now own it, and wherever it ends up going, you're going to end up paying for. So there's a lot of like, let the insurance take care of it and pick up the pieces later, as opposed to preventing it. And then the history is the other big one, right? The history of the 1960 Kapoho flow, the diversionary attempts that were made on that, maybe stalled it for a little bit of time, but ultimately failed. The 1943 bombing of Mauna Loa, as well as the previous bombing in 1935, and then subsequent testing in the 70s, and really didn't, we don't do it now. Like, it doesn't even come up in the conversations really. Which is, interesting in and of itself, especially since they just go, it reminds me of the 60s. But one of the things they said was, we're putting in roads over, still glowing lava or recent lava flows, right? And that was something that was done in 1955 for the Kalapana Pahoa Road at the time, now known as Highway 130. So it's interesting how the time and different things change, and how how you address one of these eruptions that threaten a residential neighborhood. And when the Mauna Loa happened, there wasn't any talk or really any motion towards trying to save Saddle Road. It was more about, what do we do once we lose the saddle, right? Even how important we know that roadway is to connect the east and west side of the island. So those are some of the things that just caught my attention. Anything for you?
Yeah, for me, it was the water pipe that they had rebuilt and then insulated, covered it, and it got flowed over again. And their insulation plan worked, that the lava didn't take that water pipe out again. So I don't know if that's something they had in the books that they had engineered and planned prior, or if that was somebody just on the spot putting together. But fantastic. I mean, that's pretty impressive.
I seem to remember in 2018 the water pipes were running down underneath the Poiki Road, and when the fissures happened, it broke them all. And they then did something similar where they diverted the water to just some above ground pipes, and then subsequent lava flows covered those, and those were just, you know, unprotected plastic essentially. So those were taken pretty easily, but they did try. And then after that, it was like, yep, there's no more water. Like it's bad enough that we're not playing this game anymore.
Yeah, I thought that was a really good presentation. Something I hadn't heard in that way. And just the 14 months of struggle for them is just got to be incredible to try to keep life going and rebuild.
And that thing she said where it's like the last time it was a 9-year phase. They're not in for no short bursts. This is a marathon.
Yep.
And, you know, I'm afraid one day you're just going to wake up and it's going to be south and it's going to be down near the coast. And that's what happens. And then you just know, like, oh, this is it.
Yeah.
Bought time, but, you know, if that activity is continuing and those periodic eruptions are expected to continue, that's rough. All right. Well, I think we've reached that point. We're a little bit over an hour and a half. Next week we'll have Philip Ong back on again to go over any of the latest, and we might have another episode by then. I mean, seems to be the expectation. So check out Hawaii Tracker for any posts, updates. When it goes off, there'll probably be a ton of photos and videos on there as well. So that's a Hawaii Tracker group on Facebook, and appreciate all the support we've gotten on the donations. You want to shout out any of those?
Yeah, I got a $5 donation from James Olson. Mahalo. Ed got through on our donation page at hveri.org. That's
got it working.
So $26 from Sketched Eds. Thank you very much. And one more from Lisa Lynch, $20. Says, I follow Iceland faithfully. Thanks, y'all. That's right on. Thank you all for your support. We are a 501c3 community-based organization, and we will take
one question.
Oh, you got a question? What do you got?
Yeah. Yes. Do Hawaii homeowners have trouble getting insurance or rates at extreme costs? Yes, especially after the 2018 eruption. A lot of the underwriters just weren't allowed to continue to write policies, and for the major organizations, and prices went up significantly. Trying to get new policy is a nightmare. And since the fires on Maui, it's now turned into a statewide problem because the insurance companies are starting to balance out those risky areas, and lava zone 1 and 2 in the Lower East Rift Zone, and as well as Ocean View, get hammered when it comes to insurance rates.
Yep.
Yes. And yeah, that was about it. Somebody asked about Mauna Loa being bombed, and twice they tried, and they declared success. And great job, guys. But really, nowadays, nobody really thinks it did that much, and it was more coincidental. Maybe broke some channels open, but probably about it. We have done that multiple times, and it's a interesting subject. But I think that'll do it for us this time, and we'll be back next week. Appreciate you, Lou. Thank you for joining us.
You betcha.
I'm Dane DuPont and our ASL team, which was here earlier, Carrie and Dano. So for everybody, aloha.